Hello and welcome to episode 146 of my podcast all about knitting and crochet and my yarn shop here in Wiesbaden, Germany. I'm Kiko and today is June 20th, 2022. Today I'm wearing a cotton crochet triangular shawl that's fairly old. It's 9 years old and it's a cotton with a bit of silver glitter, silver stellina in it. I'm not quite sure whether the camera picks it up, but yeah, you just might see a little bit of silvery twinkle there. This was an interesting construction because you started the shawl at the long edge of the triangle and then the crochet rows would get shorter and shorter, which was in a way quite nice because the further you got, the shorter the rows were. So towards the end, when you'd already done a lot, it seemed to be getting a lot quicker. The thing that I did not like about the pattern a lot was the fact that the pattern itself and the shape of the triangle, the shape of the pattern, they didn't really go together well. As you can see, there's partial pattern repeats. And then I think here the pattern and the edge sort of go alongside and then a new pattern appears. So it seemed a bit weird and it made crocheting the pattern a bit more difficult. I thought if I had designed the shawl, I probably would have looked for a pattern where the edge of the pattern and the edge of the shawl would sort of go parallel. So the edges would be the same, but still I like the shawl a lot. But before I put it on, I should show you the pullover I'm wearing. Yeah, it's a simply crochet pattern, but as I said, I crocheted it 9 years ago, so it's probably a rather old magazine. The pullover I'm wearing is out of this beautiful book, The Art of Circular Yokes, and I think the pattern is called Modern Art, and it's the cover pattern, and in the book it's all knit in the same color. I decided to use two different colors. So the first color I used is almost a solid color. It's just a very, very slight variation in the color so that the pattern shows nicely. And then the rest of the pullover is knit in stockinette stitch. So I thought I could use a more colorful yarn. And I'm really, really happy with how the pullover turned out. I love wearing it. And it's one of those projects that I did with my sister and some friends. It was sort of a informal, tiny little mini knit along. And my sister used white cotton, so her pullover is all in one solid color. And she turned the yoke around, so the inside of my yoke is the outside of hers. And then she changed the pattern a bit and did different edges the way she likes to do. So if you want to see that, we probably showed it on the video that we did together last December. So we sort of started a tradition of doing an episode together every December where we show off the projects that we sort of knit together, or we knit from the same pattern, and just to show how different projects can look even if you knit the same pattern. Yeah, so that's what I'm wearing today. Then on to my finished objects. I have one finished object and two new cast-ons. So this week I'll have to make sure to finish a few more things, especially as I already have quite a few new cast-ons lined up and planned. Yeah, so I do have to finish some old ones. But the finished project for today is the Celtic headband that I showed you last week. It's knit out of the chunky yarn by Wolldackel, who's a German hand dyer. They dyed this beautiful yarn. It's a pure merino yarn. It has 100 meters to 100 grams. And I used a little more than half the skein to knit this headband. So it's a free pattern on Ravelry. I link it on my project page. The project page is linked underneath the video, so you can have a look at that. The pattern says to start the cable pattern straight away. I decided to do a bit of ribbing Then I did the cable pattern 4 times, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4 pattern repeats, and that fit exactly around my head and the same around this glass head. And then I did a bit more ribbing, and then I sewed the 2 bits together. So I didn't cast off, I used the live stitches to knit it to the cast on edge. So it's a fairly invisible seam. You can feel it more than you can see it, but I thought it's going to be at my neck, underneath my hair probably. So that's fine. Yeah, really happy with this quick little project. It gives my customers something to look at and to feel, to see how this yarn knits up. Now I really want to knit something with either the DK weight yarn that Wolldackel dyed, or one of the rainbow colors, one of their Aniva colors. But first I have to finish a few more projects before I can start those 2. Okay, on to my works in progress. I knit a little bit on my second pair of Plaid Pocket socks, and just in case you forgot what they're going to look like, this is sock number 1 of my second pair knit in this pattern. So there's a little pocket knit at the same time as the sock. So this is some double knitting included in the sock. So you can see that the main color is on the sock, and the blue and the white that are in the sock as well. They are the background of the sock. You can see that I purled a few stitches that I was supposed to knit, but that's okay. It's inside the pocket, nobody's going to see. And I knit the second ribbing. So as you can see, the colors come out differently. Really happy about that. Now I can start the color work with the dark blue and the white. I could actually knit the first 2 rounds with the dark blue yarn, but with the white I'll have to wait a little bit, and I'll show you the next projects why I'm still waiting for the white yarn. And that's because I'm still knitting on my Unbearably adorable socks. So this is the first sock. I did both socks at the same time to just before the color work started, and this sock is now holding my main color yarn, so it doesn't roll around and I can just pull from the middle. I finished 3 stripes of pattern on my first sock. I decided to do only 3 stripes because I'm not knitting within the competition. The sock madness is already over, so I can do what I like. And I've added a few more rounds in between the pattern and decided to do 3 stripes of pattern. And with the second sock, I finished the first and I'm in the middle of doing the second bit of pattern. And I thought maybe it's quite interesting for you to see what that looks like. At the moment, I have about 160 something stitches on the needle. My sock is knit with 63 stitches, but because of those stacked stitches, what you do is you increase stitches in the main color, then you change to the contrast color and you do both increases and decreases. And then I purled around with my contrast color, and now I have to knit around with my main color. And the next round, I'm going to decrease the stitches sort of back to normal, not quite, but almost. And then I will finally see what the pattern looks like. But I just wanted to show you, this is what it looks like with all the stitches on the needle or on the cable. But as the cable is flexible, what I can do is I can already sort of form the cable, and you can already see kind of what the pattern is going to look like once I put the decreases in. So there's already a lot of knitting that happened here, but the bit of knitting that's missing is in here. And this is where all the decreases will take place. And then I'll have the next bit of pattern that's already knit. So it's really, really interesting to see this and then to sort of have it all back straight again. And it's the increases aren't too fiddly, I feel, but the next round after this round where you do all the decreases, that's rather fiddly, but I think it's worth doing to get this nice pattern and to have a 2-color pattern with no floats and where you only work 1 color at a time. So yeah, these are stacked stitches. Don't know if I've mentioned that already. It's a really nice, really interesting technique. I probably wouldn't do it for socks again because you usually knit socks fairly tightly, and I think it's harder to do the decreases, especially when you knit so tightly. So I think it's a pattern that's fantastic for scarves and shawls that you can knit loosely, and then your stitches are a bit looser and it's a bit easier to be knitting several stitches together on top of each other. Yeah, so that's the second pair of socks that I have on my needles. The tiny socks, if I had knit on them, I would show at the end of the episode, but I haven't. So it's not a lot of socks I have going at the moment, but I have several pairs planned. I'm still thinking about knitting the socks of the Sock Madness round 6 and 7. I'm not 100% sure I will do those, but I'm still thinking about it. But I definitely have a pair planned for the pattern battle that we do with the subscription yarn by Opal. I'll talk about that in a second. So yeah, there are things planned, and I certainly will do more tiny and little socks for our knit along. But the next project with sock yarn, that's not socks, that's the baby jacket I'm knitting, and I am knitting that as part of the pattern battle. So this is the color out of the subscription box by Opal. With every box, one color is chosen, and then we knit this pattern battle where you can, if you want to take part, you have to pick a pattern that nobody has picked so far. So you have to look at the patterns that have been put down before, and then you can pick a pattern and you can put it down, and then you can take part. And I chose to do this little baby jacket by Stephanie Lotvin out of her book Knit Happy with Self-Striping Yarn. And I have started with the 2 side pieces. I finished both sleeves, and I have finished both the front pieces. So this is the one with the buttonholes. I think this is the one that I knit last week, and this is the button band that will get the buttons. And I actually changed something on this because I undid the cast off that I had. The cast off was fairly loose, and this was sort of hanging down quite a bit. So I undid the cast off, and I cast off a bit more tightly. And the next thing I've done is I've picked up the stitches to knit the back, but I will also knit the back in pieces. So everything about this jacket is knit in pieces so that the yarn looks differently, and you can see the stripes in different ways. So what I'm going to do is knit half the back on this bit, then pick up stitches from here and knit the second half of the back, and then I'll do a 3 needle bind off from the outside so you get this visible seam down the back. And then all I have to do is pick up stitches and knit the collar, and then knit up stitches, do the ribbing down here, which I think is not knit in ribbing, I think it's a garter stitch edge. So it's lots and lots and lots of picking up stitches with this way of knitting a baby jacket. It's not the easiest and fastest, but I love the way the yarn comes out and looks, and so I enjoy doing it, and I'm sure I'll keep doing it. This won't be the last jacket I knit from that pattern. So that's the little jacket, and then I knit on my jacket, and that's the Wolldackel neon jacket is what the project is called. And for ages and ages I was just knitting Hansa Farm yarn in black because it's basically a black cardigan which gets a really nice collar or edging on the fronts. And last week I showed you that I had picked up all the stitches up the one front, round the neckline, and then down the other front. And then I started knitting short rows with my first contrast color, which is this beautiful blue, which is not a solid color, but it has these little speckles of dark gray, which I think go nicely with the black. Could have done a gray jacket, but I I like the black with the bright colors that are still coming, so I'm really happy with that. I finished this half of the edging, then I knit over to the other side, and I started the short row shaping on this side of the cardigan. And once I've done that, I think I'm going to knit, I think 3 more rows, and then I'll change to the second color. And one thing I just wanted to quickly say is with my short rows, I always stop 9 stitches before the last time I turned. So what I'm doing at the moment, the pattern doesn't tell you to use a stitch marker, but I think it's a lot easier once I've turned round to just count 9 stitches and then put the stitch marker in. So coming from here, it's a lot more stitches to count, or I have to really pay attention to where I last turned round. So with this way, it's a lot easier. I'll just knit to here, turn round, count to 9, put the marker in again, and then this way I work down to the very bottom, and then, as I said, a few more rows, and then I'll add in the next color. So really excited about that. And the next garment I have on my needle that I'm knitting with 4-ply sock yarn is the Go Big or Go Gnome pullover by Sierra Shawl. And I finished both the sleeves, so it's a bottom-up pullover with a yoke, with a color work yoke, and the yoke will have the gnomes in it. And so the sleeves are fairly simple. It's just the blue ribbing and then the main color simple stockinette. And now I started knitting the front and back, and so far I'm still knitting the ribbing, and once the ribbing is done I will change to the main color, but then the front and back will have a little color work detail with little mushrooms, with little red mushrooms. So looking forward to doing that. Yeah, so that's all the sock yarn projects for today. That means we're getting into the cotton department now. I have more cotton projects than usual. And the first one I'm sure, oh, by the way, I did not knit on the Vortex shawl. That's a cotton project as well, but didn't get around to doing that. I'll make sure I'll knit on it this week. Didn't knit on the memory blanket, mainly because I forgot to take it home. So the blanket was here in the shop, but the black yarn and the needles were at home. And I crocheted on the dinosaur blanket, but only 2 rows. And I thought it wasn't worth showing and carrying here. So I'll show that next week. I'll make sure to add a few more rows, and then I can show that again next week. But the things I did work on, the first one is this top where I'm knitting the stripes in the helix method. So I'm just knitting like 4 spirals on top of each other, so I'm not crossing the colors or anything. I don't have a beginning of round anywhere, and the colors are inspired from a part of Germany that's called Lüneburger Heide, and I looked it up, and Heide actually means heath or heathland, and I think heather is the name for the plant that grows there, and that's sort of this color. And it's those plants that inspired me to choose these colors, because you have lots of green because of the leaves and the trees and the grass in between, but then you have the flowers that sort of have these colors. And so I just added a lot more rounds, it feels, but I still have to add several more rounds before I can start the front and back parts. But last night we decided to, we booked another little trip to this part of Germany for July, and that got me thinking that'd be really nice to have that top finished by then, so I can wear the top that was inspired by those colors while I'm there. That'd be really fun. So I will try and do that. We'll see how that works. Yeah, but the next project is a crochet project, and I've been working on that for a really long time, it seems. And that's the little sort of doily or mini blanket or something that I am crocheting to put in my kitchen here, where I have like two, I never know how to call that. Is it a stovetop? But it's something where I can cook, and I could put two pots on there, but I would like to cover it up while I'm not using it. And when I saw this pattern, I knew I wanted to have that. So this is the width I need, and the length will be 5 of these squares. And I actually finished crocheting all the squares. So that's the good news. The bad news is I haven't woven in my ends yet, as you can see, and I haven't done any more sewing together. So I sewed that together towards the beginning of that project. So I have, how many are there? I think it's 9 more squares. Yeah, so it's 2 times 3 and 3 times 3 will be added. But now that they're all done, I just need to sit down, weave in the ends, start sewing it together. I'm pretty sure I can finish that this week. I'm still thinking about adding an edge around it. I think that's what I originally planned to do and then completely forgot about. But yeah, maybe I'll do an edge around in the dark blue. And I was thinking if I don't increase, but just crochet round and round so that it won't grow, but it sort of go in a 90-degree angle, I could sort of fix it onto the top so it wouldn't slide off. I think that's a good idea. But I think first I'll have to sew all the pieces together, see what the size is like, and then I can make decisions about an edge around it. Yeah, but really happy about having finished all those pieces. And then there's 2 more projects. The next project is, so it was a bit of a surprise, but only a bit. As you know, I like the Simply Crochet magazine, and I have a subscription, a digital subscription for that magazine. So when they do crochet alongs where you get a bit of the pattern in every magazine, it's quite okay for me because I'm getting the magazines anyway. And 2 years ago, I did the pullover. What was it called? It was a pullover made of several different sized squares, and you could either crochet a blanket or a pullover. And I did both a pullover and a cardigan version in that pattern. And now 2 months ago, they started a new crochet along for a blanket, but not in pieces, but from the center out. But it's still divided, I think, into 6 parts. And we're already into the 3rd part until I made up my mind to actually join the crochet along. The pattern is called the Talavera blanket, and it's crocheted out of 5 different colors. And they use 2 blues that are kind of like these. They use an off-white. I use a pure white. Then they use a dark pink that's a lot more red than the pink that I'm using. And then they have a golden yellow. And I didn't want to use a golden yellow, so I decided to add a light pink. So I have a light and a dark pink, a light and a dark blue, and white. And I'm still crocheting on the first bit of the pattern that was in the magazine 2 months ago. And this is what I have so far. So in the pattern, they call for an acrylic yarn and a 5.5 millimeter hook. But I wanted to use the cotton yarn, the Catania, which is probably a lot thinner than the one that they're using. So they call for a 2.5 to 3.5 millimeter needle for this yarn. I tend to work it with a 4 millimeter needle. So both these squares and this top, I'm working with 4 millimeter needles. But because the blanket was meant to be done with a thicker yarn, I decided to use a 4.5 millimeter needle for this blanket, especially as I want the blanket to be a bit softer, not too hard. And I'm quite happy. It's fairly loose. It's worked fairly loosely, so it's a bit it feels a bit unusual. And sometimes those threads, especially if you just crochet into either the front or the back loop, it seems fairly, those loops get stretched quite a bit, but I think it doesn't look too bad. It's not too obvious. So yeah, I decided to stick with it. So the middle bit in the original is done with the golden yellow. So I should have used the pink, but I wanted to use the blue. So I'm just playing around with the colors a little bit, but I'm quite happy with the way the colors look together, and I'm looking forward to continuing the crochet. And one of the reasons I thought about starting the blanket was that if I only get part of the pattern, I can only do so much every month, and then I can wait for the next pattern. But having started so late, I can crochet along for quite a bit, and we'll see if I ever catch up with the way the pattern is being released. So that was the first new cast on of last week, and the other new cast on is a knit project, and that's the Sierra Shawl by Romy. Romy is one of my favorite designers, one of the first designers that I found on Ravelry, and I own loads and loads of her patterns. I've knit quite a few, but there's a lot more patterns that I own that I haven't knit yet, and now I finally started knitting the Sierra Shawl, and I'm sort of doing that in a tiny knit along with a friend of mine, as we have the same yarn. And I forgot the ball band, and I forgot what the yarn is called. So I remember it's half wool, half silk, and it has about, I think, 700 meters to 100 grams. So it's a lace weight yarn, and I am planning to use red and black. So with the pattern, you're supposed to use a main color, and then for the contrast color, you can use mini skeins and have different contrast colors. But I'm just using the one contrast color, and then black is going to be my main color. And this pattern is part of a Craftsy class. So you not only get the pattern, but you have videos where every technique and every step is being explained, which is quite nice. So this is what the shawl looks like at the moment. So you start at the tip and you knit a tiny triangle with a lace pattern in it. I think this way you can see those little motifs. And now the next step that I have to do is I'm going to bind off the stitches of this triangle, and then I'm going to pick up stitches from both sides. And then I'm going to knit downwards with both colors, and then it's a modular setup of the shawl where you knit the contrast colors in different bits and parts. You'll see that when I get there, or you can have a look at the pattern on Ravelry or on Craftsy. Yeah, so next time I'll remember to show you what the yarn is called, and I will also put it on Ravelry. I couldn't do that this morning because, as I said, forgot to bring the ball band. But it's a very nice yarn, and it's a very interesting pattern. So I'm really looking forward to continuing to do that. And I've had this yarn for quite a while. So it's an old yarn and it's an old pattern that I've had for years. So I'm really happy about using those up, or just using them. Yeah, so that's that. That's everything I knit and crocheted last week. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!